Hello and welcome. You're watching Business Plus. The top story we are tracking at this hour comes from Nestle, where Nestle has now clarified that the company's infant food formulation for children below 18 months is done on a global basis, and the allegation that it is racially stereotyped is unfortunate and untrue. Now, Nestle India says that the added sugar content in Cerelac is much lower than the upper limit prescribed by FSSAI. There is nothing in the product that makes it potentially of any risk to any child anywhere. Now, as per Food Safety Standards Authority of India, the permissible level of added sugar is 13.6 grams per 100 grams of feed. Nestle says that it adds only 7.1 grams, which is well below the standards in India and the maximum limits set up by FSSAI. Earlier this month, Swiss FMCG major Nestle was accused of selling products with more sugar content in less developed countries. According to findings by Swiss NGO Public Eye, Nestle sold baby products with higher sugar content in less developed South Asian countries, including India, in Africa, in Latin American nations, as compared to its market in Europe. This is an ongoing story where Nestle finally has come out and clarified that the added sugar is well below the permissible limit. With me in the studios are my colleague Karthik Malhotra, Krishna Kumar. Karthik, I want to come to you first. Nestle is clarifying what we already have been stating from day one, that first, it advertises that it has sugar in Cerelac. Number two, it is well within the permissible limit. So where is the problem then?
I think the problem, very simply put, Shweta, is that the permissible levels prescribed by FSSAI are perhaps either outdated or definitely need a re-examination, and a new limit needs to be set, because if there are global health bodies and agencies within and outside India, including practicing pediatricians who say very clearly that children don't need any sugar content whatsoever, then pretty much FSSAI needs to recalibrate its own reporting structures and its own prescriptions by telling these global FMCG giants as well as their Indian counterparts that added sugar need not be added to any baby food.
All right. So essentially, Krishna, the problem that I'm seeing at the moment is that although Nestle India is saying, the MD came out on record to say that we are not differentiating India from the rest of the world when it comes to Cerelac for children below 18 months of age. What about children who are over 18 months of age? You are adding sugar and it's not needed.
Right. And of course, it's baby food, for God's sakes. You know, this is a situation where they are under the permissible limits that are set by India. But at the end of the day, the question here is that is the amount of sugar added for the Indian and other South Asian markets more than what they add in the European markets? And why is it that so? So clearly, because the standards set in Europe and other Western markets are much higher, or rather, the permissible limits are much lower than that, and so they have to adhere to that. So this is a question of whether Nestle is staying true to what it should ideally be doing when it comes to its baby food, not as a question of, we are sticking to technicalities. What Nestle has come out here and said is that, technically speaking, we are below the permissible limits prescribed by your Food Safety Authority.
So technically we are right.
Yeah, it's a technicality. The question is, why this much sugar in the first place, when you clearly understand how much of sugar is even required by a human body on a daily basis?
All right, so technically Nestle is saying that it has done nothing wrong. In fact, the FSSAI set limits are being adhered to. The upper limit is also being adhered to when it comes to every feed for every 100 grams of Cerelac. But so far, it's the regulations that need to play the catch-up. But with that, it's time for a short break on this side. We'll be back with more stories on the other side. Keep watching Newsline.
Currently, the industry is facing a lot of challenges as far as demand is concerned. Basically, the US markets has slowed down because of high inflation.
So obviously, diamonds being a dream product, something which doesn't have a utility value or is seen as a luxury. So that obviously goes off your shopping list. That's the first item that will go off your shopping list, especially in recessionary trends.
That lab-grown diamonds are not mined, and they do away with the entire mining. So they save up on all the environmental damage that is associated with mining, and of course, the mining cost, which is why they're even more affordable.
People that is impacted by all these recessions are the artisans, are the people who work in this industry, right? But I think lab-grown diamond has allowed them to actually use their skills in the same product.
This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.
Why is the state not looking at putting an embargo on that?
As a Telangana person, I will not accept.
How do ordinary folks deal with this?
"40 countries, 1,000 multilingual bookstalls, 1.25 lakh people, one destination, the New Delhi World Book Fair 2024.
So it's a great honour to be here. Thank you to the National Book Trust and those that have embraced us over recent days.
I was at the London Book Fair once and I had not participated here, but this fair is an ocean and it's beautiful.
This should be your annual spring picnic.
Through the power of knowledge, we are going to create responsible citizens with global skills and also global responsibility.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
You were the chosen one to direct Mr. Bachchan for his first endorsement, for his first appearance on the small screen.
It was a life-changing moment.
Have you been a rebel with a cause?
There was a sense of responsibility, there was a sense of frustration.
Are you worried about cancel culture?
You tell a story with a fierce psychosis, you're gonna spoil it anyway.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Business Plus. In light of the RBI's supervisory action against banks for failure to plug technological gaps in their systems, private banks are now experiencing a significant increase in IT expenses. According to media reports, IT expenses now amount to 10% of the capital expenditure due to recurring cost of upgrading IT as more and more transactions happen digitally today. The data has come to light after RBI asked private sector lender Kotak Mahindra Bank to stop onboarding new customers through its online and mobile banking applications and also barred the bank from issuing fresh credit cards. The action was taken as the bank had failed to plug gaps in its information technology systems. There were frequent outages in the bank's core banking system and online channels in the last 2 years, inconveniencing customers. What does this new regulatory action on Kotak Mahindra Bank mean for all the other lenders? Let's discuss that. Srinath Sridharan, policy researcher, corporate advisor, joining us. Krishna and Karthik continue to be with me. I want to come to you first, Srinath. Thank you for taking time out and joining us here once again on News 9. What does this supervisory action really mean for banks? The media reports that we are looking at right now suggesting that banks are now focusing more than ever on IT expenses.
Yeah, I think this is the first time focus has been brought in, as we've been speaking about data and digital for much too long. And there is now a supervisory focus on saying how do you build data and digital and how robust is your infrastructure. I think in light of also the cyber attacks that India has faced over the last 3 years, ever since COVID had been around, we have seen a lot of cyber attacks across various institutions. And banks are one of the largest national security aspects. So for them to invest in IT infrastructure, not just in terms of dealing with the customer, but also data management and data governance becomes extremely important. And it is not new. I'm surprised that banks are actually coming out now. The last couple of days of media narrative seems to be as if banks are taken in by surprise. They should not be. The very fact that banks have been one of the earliest adopters of technology since probably the last 40 years. Banks were the first ones to use artificial intelligence in ATM machines. And that's a reality. But I think the last 5-6 years of competition between banks or the traditional institutions versus fintechs is now playing out. So the question is, are banks technology entities trying to offer financial solutions, or are they finance entities using technology to reach consumers? And I think that's a challenge that regulators like RBI will now have to take a call on. Does it mean that fintechs at some point in time will become banks, if not at least digital banks? Probably, who knows? I think there was a idea that Niti Aayog had put 2 years ago, they had put this idea out. And I am very, I think, happy that this conversation about IT is becoming important. And I just want to draw an analogy about how banks, some of the banks still are very, very outdated in terms of technology, because they think technology, but they don't think digital native. And Shweta, here the Indian demographics, 2/3 of Indians less than 35 years of age, means they're digital native citizens, which means they intuitively think everything as digital, single touch process and everything. Whereas banks have gone through the hierarchy of the bureaucracy of papers and papers. So filling a physical form, scanning it is not digital banking.
Okay.
The reality is you try to today renew your fixed deposit with most of the banks, but for the top 5 across each of the categories, whether private sector, multinational, or public sector, the others are still paper dependent and back-end dependent. So they're not digital native or digital first. And I think the challenges are emanating from those. So it's not surprising that the capex seem very large. They're not. If you look at the spends on the branch network expansion versus the IT infrastructure, I think this is the name of the game. The next 10 years, I think if the banks have to succeed, they have to play the digital native card.
Okay, I think I agree, with what Srinath is saying, and often in management, a difficult question to answer is, which industry do you belong to? For example, is Paytm a finance company or a technology company? I can ask you the same question about Netflix. Is Netflix a content company or a technology company? Similarly for banks, what are banks today? Banks, at the end of the day, while they are managing your finances, they are not really producing money and offering it to customers. They are custodians of your money and investing your money using technology, and IT services as the core of their business. So, not surprising, therefore, that IT spends are only increasing year on year. Another point I want to make here, Shweta, is that while we still debate upon which industry do banks belong to today, the fundamental question is that banking at the end of the day is a homogeneous service. How do you differentiate what ICICI does with what HDFC does with what Kotak Mahindra does? At the end of the day, barring maybe a second decimal point difference in interest rates here or there, at the end of the day, it is exactly the same service being offered by banks across the board. So, how do you retain customers? How do you attract new customers? And how do you make the customers who are with you transact more with you?
Absolutely.
So, I think the answer to all of that lies in the fact how robust is your IT infrastructure. And using IT, what are the experiences that you're able to give customers?
And where do the public sector banks feature in this entire conversation? You talked a lot about HDFC and you talked about ICICI, and all of these are private banking institutions. These are private lenders. What about public sector banks, which is where I think they lagged massively? Come to think of an SBI or a PNB or SBI for that matter, when we were talking about electoral bonds and they physically had receipts of those electoral bonds, not even a digital copy, maybe it was mandated by law, but all in all the conversations that perhaps public sector banks are not keeping pace, Srinath.
So I think, Shweta, SBI is a clear positive outlier. It is probably one of the well-defined best digital banking by design. I think from 2014 or 2015, they've gone on to the digital transformation journey. If at all any banking institution in India can claim to even work with big data, it would be SBI. The very fact that they could create a digital bank, YONO, within the larger banking umbrella, and yet keep pace without a single large error that they have ever faced so far, phenomenally superior. I think even the private sector banks in India, without any names, have not been able to match to that size and scale and efficiency. See, the private sector, you have an advantage of throwing money and saying, let me go and acquire talent, pay market rate, and let me get consultants to work on it. Whereas in the public sector, you still are working with constraints, which means your ability to train and retrain people across the largest branch network is phenomenal. So I think SBI is a clear outlier, much to be learned. And again, this is a message for even the government, right? I mean, government ends up owning 12 other banks, which means that can't they pick something from the best in class that they have within their own ownership structure and cascade it across all PSBs? I think that's a challenge that government has, and I believe that, of course, this is not a political debate, but the term 3 of the Modi government might see some of those governance and reforms coming in the PSB banks. But coming to private sector banks, I think I must say as a customer, there is not a single competition differentiation strategy at all, right, as a customer. I mean, whether it's a bank A or a bank B or a bank C, almost all retail products, as Karthik said, but for the decimal point is the same. The attrition across relationship manager, I think the word relationship manager should be banned from banking. I mean, there's no relationship at all. Customers actually fight for getting grievances heard. So which means there is no competitive differentiation at all. Hence, the product that they come out with is all looking the same. I mean, I think you pick 3 brochures in the market and change the logo. I don't think customer can figure it out in a blind test. I think they might figure out a Pepsi and a Coke in a blind test, but not the bank product.
Absolutely. And you know, as perhaps some first-time customers who are hoping to open a bank account will be looking at this conversation and trying to understand and figure out what public sector lender should I go to, what private lender should I go to, should it be HDFC or ICICI or SBI, which has outdone many of its public sector peers in the past couple of years. I think one of the key differentiator, of course, would be the kind of facility, the mobile banking facilities that some of these private sector lenders offer, and whether they allow you to open a bank account sitting in the comfort of your home. So IT services which are customer friendly, which enable you to have a better experience sitting in the comfort of your homes.
You're right. So, you know, I think some challenges which banks have already grappled with and emerged much stronger happened almost 8-9 years back, Shweta. For the first time, I remember in 2016 when I was opening yet another bank account, yet another salary account with yet another company, you know, it was the
which
first
is another
time,
problem.
Yeah, which is, of course, so, you know, too many bank accounts is another problem, which I think centrally, again, RBI needs to do something about, especially the dormant accounts. But I think the fact of the matter is that for the first time I saw in 2016 that I did not need to sign a single paper physically. There was no need for a pen and printouts and photographs. It was all through biometrics, right? But cut to another private sector bank in about, I think, which year was this, 2020, you know, just because of so much tech upgradation, it was so difficult actually finding my user ID because the phone number which was entered into my bank was incorrectly done, that just to rectify that tech glitch became a nightmare for me. So I was unable to use my yet another new salary account for a good period of about a month or so because my customer ID was being sent as an SMS or, you know, some sort of a digital communication on a mobile number which was not mine. So in this paperless environment, how do you go and tally books and figure out that, hey, you know, it is actually my bank account, but guess what? You haven't yet issued me my checkbook, my, you know, debit card is yet to arrive at my postal address and the phone number that you've entered is incorrect. So I think while banks continue to spend on technology and continue to upgrade the tech interface for users, I think that is where you need a complete, absolute, zero error, flawless process that follows, where your biometrics do all the linking with no need for any physical entry of either addresses or mobile numbers. So you update whatever updations need to be done in your Aadhaar, and the same exact KYC should apply with no need for any manual intervention and hence no errors. And that could be one of the cases or use cases for RBI when it is actually doing a clampdown against banks which perhaps have not yet upgraded their IT to that level.
It's a very good idea, Krishna, come to think of it, using your Aadhaar card to perhaps manage your multiple bank accounts, but perhaps in a far too fetched reality, not for now.
No, I think it is very easy. I don't know why that hasn't been done or isn't being
there is,
done
if
yet.
not the Aadhaar, we do have the PAN card, for God's sakes. One way or the other, you should be able to do it seamlessly. The other question that pops up in my mind right now is this. We are in the day and age of UPI. And our touch points with our bank accounts invariably, you know, are linked to our UPI transactions, and that run into many dozens of transactions on a daily basis. So there is a real need then to understand the fact that, like, you know, once upon a time, people used a desktop to access internet the first time, and the desktop then became a laptop. Now, the first touch point for internet for most Indians is a mobile phone. Literally the same thing, similar thing has happened with banking as well. Many people open bank accounts these days so that they can access it through their UPI accounts, and hence, I think there is to be a larger understanding of how much load can a system take so that there are no outages. If a private sector bank like Kotak Mahindra Bank comes under the scanner for having outages, imagine other banks, other private sector banks and public sector banks which have a much larger customer base and they can't afford to have outages, especially in the day and age of UPI. Shweta.
Absolutely. And Srinath, before I let you go, I think an important question that perhaps we would like to get an answer to is that do you see the IT expenses going only up from here on, perhaps from 30% that many banks are reporting at this point of their operational cost to 50 or 60%? Does that number only go up from here?
Shweta, yes. I think we are not adding the indirect cost. Whenever we implement any IT solution, I think the nature of redesigning entire business processes around it so that it is digital first is not mapped. I think that's where a lot of the banks and financial institutions are suffering. What I mean is, you had an existing process work for the previous 10 years, and suddenly when you bring in technology or digitization, you need to reimagine all those processes from consumer at the center of those processes. And most of these journeys have not been mapped very well. And that's a reality, which is why glitches are happening. Two, I think somewhere a lot of these institutions are not factoring the need for adequate training and constant unlearning programs, which means that ability to implement a system or a software, but over the next 3 years, keep refining it and doing it again and again and training the people. There is a cost involved there.
Right.
And I think that is not being done. And some of the banks, without naming the bank, I can tell you some of the banks have a simple training program, like every time you log in onto your system in the morning, whether it's at the branch or wherever you are, it actually prompts a question for you for the day about the system, about the process, about the training. And it actually makes you actually like answer the quiz. So imagine if you're an employee, you're there for 220 days a year, you're actually learning 220 different features of the software system. It's a simple idea, it doesn't cost anything, right? So there are enough ideas and more how to bring in training. But I think we all get carried away. The CTO or the CDO says, we have implemented whatever the project code and life is beautiful ever after, there'll be a media blitzkrieg. That's about it. Coming back, even in the Kotak's case, the RBI's notice was very clear.
Right.
For 2 years, they have been following with the bank. It is not as if it came out of the blue. And that's a learning also in the regulated space, that when the regulator tells you that something is amiss, take it seriously then and there. I mean, this time it was very clear that despite the goodwill the bank enjoys in the market, the regulatory actions have been very, very clear. And going forward, yes, the IT investments, I wouldn't call them expenses. If you want to be in the banking space in the 21st century, I think you need to invest in technology.
Absolutely. And no more a one-time capital expenditure. It's a recurring expense in training staff and in also ensuring your IT is enabled to deal with the magnitude, the momentum of internet banking transactions that we're seeing on a daily basis. Srinath, thank you very much for taking time out. Thank you for joining us here on News 9. Shifting focus now, Mahindra and Mahindra is all set to launch the XUV 3XO today. The new Mahindra XUV 3XO is a facelift version of the sub-4 meter SUV XUV 300, which was first launched back in 2019. The Mahindra XUV 3XO will compete in a competitive segment which consists of Tata Nexon, Maruti Suzuki Brezza, Hyundai Venue and Kia Sonet, among others. Now, Tata Nexon leads the segment in sales and has also seen a major update recently. Will the new XUV 300 facelift be able to compete? And what are going to be its features that people should look out for? Krishna Kumar, of course, who continues to track all the automobile updates, perhaps can give us some sense of what is anticipated and expected.
Look, the XUV 300 has been one of Mahindra's successful models, but the thing is that it is upgraded it at a time when the entire competition it faces. You talked about the Brezza, you talked about the Tata Nexon, very successful cars. There is also a car called Kia Sonet.
I did mention that.
And my problem with Kia Sonet is that Kia Sonet, about 2 years ago when it debuted, it was the car of that Diwali season. Like right. You couldn't get it for at least, you had a waiting list of at least 4 to 6 months when it was launched. So Tata Nexon, sort of built itself up over a period of 2-3 years to become the #1 selling car. But then every single car in that segment are top selling models across the board. There's Kia Sonet, there's Brezza, there is the Hyundai Venue as well. Hyundai Venue maybe not that much. So my concern here with Mahindra XUV 3XO is just this much. The cost range for the XUV 3XO is anywhere between 8 to 16. The only question is when other cars with equal facelifts and probably equal or better features are hitting the sweet spot in that 10 to 11 lakh range. Can the Mahindra XUV 300, face up to them, Karthik?
My sort of, expectation from any facelift from the Mahindra stable was and continues to be, and unfortunately I don't think I'm going to see it in the 3XO, is that the whole world seems to be moving towards electric mobility. But the 3XO is likely to be launched in petrol versions only. And Mahindra, to be honest, has thus far been the market leader when it came to diesel SUVs, but it hasn't tasted much success in petrol. And the only electric variant that it has is the XUV 400. Unfortunately, the 3XO in this new avatar is also going to be only a petrol car. So facelift is great, but is it going to be a car that Mahindra wants to keep in its in its segment
kitty,
for
right?
in its kitty for eternity? Definitely not. And I think the second problem really with the 3XO is going to be that some of the automatic drive, the automatic transmission, lower base variants are still going to have that very rudimentary AMT gearbox, and that may not really cut it with with the likes of a Hyundai Venue or a Kia Sonet today.
Absolutely, but XUV 3XO, they're all set to launch perhaps in a couple of hours from now. The price range, as my colleague Krishna Kumar let out, was about
8.5
to 15 to 16.
That's a huge price range, actually.
It's a huge price range, and we'll get you more details, of course, as and when they come out. But moving on, Tesla CEO Elon Musk arrived in China on Sunday, barely a week after he cited Tesla-related obligations to defer his much-anticipated India visit, where he was to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi and founders of Indian space startup. Now, Musk met Chinese Premier Li Qiang in Beijing on Sunday, and Musk wants to enable full self-driven feature in China, which is available in other countries and is the second largest market for electric car maker. Baidu is the only one of about 20 qualified suppliers with a key module for self-driving function, and Tesla is said to have cleared that hurdle, that very key hurdle, to introduce its advanced assisted driving feature in China by partnering with Baidu in mapping and navigation systems. The surprise visit to China comes amid a sharp decline in production for Tesla units and questions raised by its investors. Tesla's operations in Shanghai are biggest globally, producing over 1 million units of Model 3 and Model Y cars in a year. Now, Musk was expected to be in India earlier. He ditched India as the government rolled out an electric vehicle policy last month, largely to accommodate Texas-based car maker. Surprisingly, he cancelled that visit last minute, but he was in China, and that visit in China has bore fruit for him.
I mean, we spoke about this earlier on our morning show as well, Shweta, and I feel, there has been some level of tech diplomacy at play here. So the question really is, again, what we were asking in the context of India: who needs whom more? Does India need Tesla more, or does Tesla need India more? I think the same
Can you now answer affirmatively?
No, I still can't, unfortunately, but I think the same equation holds true even in the case of China. Does China need Tesla, or does Tesla need China? But I'm able to answer it clearly in that context. China does not need Tesla as much as Tesla needs China, because China is Tesla's second largest market after the US. And this tech diplomacy that I was referring to has been perhaps one of the arm-twisting moves done by the Chinese government, really coaxing Elon Musk to ensure that his partnership among the 20 qualified bidders is only with China-based Baidu, to use the Baidu maps. But there has been a small win for Elon Musk as well, that this data which for the autonomous driving vehicles, the self-driving vehicles, this data of Baidu maps which Tesla uses for its autonomous cars will actually be allowed to be transmitted outside of China to the US to actually make the self-driving cars and the future of self-driving cars arrive at a little faster than earlier. So it has been a win-win for both, but I can very clearly say that there was a reason why perhaps Elon Musk decided not to come to India and within a week decided to go to China instead, because he has sold over 6 lakh cars in China compared to a maximum cap of only 8,000 that he can sell in India. China obviously is a bigger market that Tesla does not want to mess around with, Elon Musk does not want to mess around with, and has perhaps for that reason kept India on the back burner.
All right, India on the back burner permanently, or at least this year?
I mean, nothing is permanent, as they say.
So we could see some Tesla cars coming in.
We would definitely see Tesla, because India is also a very large market. market for Tesla or Elon Musk to ignore, given his other business interests also in India. But I think the larger point is, if Elon Musk and Tesla were to come to India immediately, they would have to be they would have to take the responsibility of building and developing the entire ecosystem, which is already a plug and play for the same company in China.
And perhaps
so would they want to make those large investments right now, or wait for the industry to mature and come and be one of the leading players in that industry, rather than the founding fathers of that industry and set up the entire
Don't want to take
ecosystem?
that risk. Perhaps Tesla is not prepared to take that risk to enter India just as yet, but Tesla chief Elon Musk's visit to China at least has bore fruit for Tesla till now. But with that, it's the end of the show. Thank you very much for watching.
अगला स्टेशन विश्वविद्यालय है, दरवाजे बाईं तरफ खुलेंगे।
Gone are the days when starting a business meant burning a hole in your pocket, or taking a loan for that matter, and being that one-man army in your own firm. Today's Gen Zs are breaking all the norms.
Gen Z is all about purpose. They do not just want to work, they want to work for a purpose, they want to work for a mission.
The next set of entrepreneurs would be actually today's students, and they can bring in changes that would be generational.
We as commerce students at Sri Ram College of Commerce have been looking at, we wish to contribute therein as well.
SRCC's Business Conclave is the largest undergraduate management fest in Asia, organized entirely by the students. A hub of energy and ideas, here young minds come together to learn, grow and chase their entrepreneurial aspirations. They are not just talking about breaking the mold, they are doing it, one innovation at a time.
What it takes to succeed in building a business. And my journey started at a very, very young age of 20.
It's not just about coming to a campus and then targeting a job once you're leaving the campus, but it's also the exposure students can achieve here. And also in terms of employability, not just from a job perspective, but also in terms of job they can create. So that way, this conclave has been useful in at least ensuring students out here have that exposure to how the business world operates. So it's more like a bridge between industry and students over here.
The energy is amazing, the speaker lineup is amazing, and the crowd, of course.
Give it up for the young pool of your own college, SRCC!
It is really enthusiastic framework here, energies are so high, and the spirits of something networking that is at its peak, which I could have imagined, I got that.
As a commerce college, it makes sense to focus on startups, to give that vibrant ecosystem for startups, to mentor them, to give them a place to discuss things, brainstorm, thrive. And they've added that this year, so it's a great step. And as always, the program has expanded. Every year they try to do something else, and every year they succeed in bringing something new. So bigger, better than ever before.
This year, the Business Conclave was themed Igniting Leadership, Inspiring Excellence. empowering students to reach new heights. Attendees here interacted with industry leaders, inspiring them to excel and push their boundaries.
We have students from our own college who you would see thriving here and there, right? Attending sessions, we have multiple speakers actually coming and telling their stories and their insight. And also we are inviting a bunch of students from across the North Campus and actually across India. And that too brings a lot of external energy because this being Asia's largest business fest.
Being a great opportunity and also a great opportunity for the student, because we know that SRCC is a very premium institute for the commerce student, and Business Conclave gives a very good opportunity who wants to lead the market.
Startup Expo is going on, mentorship sessions are going on. Tomorrow pitching will begin, networking launch will be there, corporate dinner will be there. We're just super busy, but again, super happy to organize it.
I mean, which are highly sensitive of the states.
We have the sports panel, the influencer panel, the CEO panel, and these two insights from the speakers actually help students in the sense of building a real-life connection with them. From the policy consulting to the case com, normal case com, the crisis case com, or the technology case com, for them to interact with the real colleges from different students from colleges and have a kind of a competition where they can use their skills and expertise.
The rise of entrepreneurship and the startup culture among Indian college students has been a transformative force in the nation's economy. It is from these very colleges that the next generation of entrepreneurs will emerge.
India produces between 1,500 and 2,000 films every year, the highest for any country, but they get ignored at international awards.
The Oscars are basically American national awards for themselves.
You're not going to be able to make a better pizza than an Italian chef. You're not going to be able to make a better sushi than a Japanese chef. Will you make better khichdi than a Japanese chef? Right? So I want you to taste my food. We are making cinema that we are proud of. Yeah.
In fact, it has been 2 decades since an Indian feature film featured in the Oscars International Film category.
All these years, for much of its history, they've been just awarding their own films, and this one tiny category, Best Foreign Language Film, had the entire world frothing at the mouth to get into the Oscars.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Namaskara, welcome to News 9 Show, the South Indian. My name is Sudha Sadanan. As usual, I shall bring to you 9 top stories from the south of India. Let me now begin with the first one. JDS MP Prajwal Revanna caught in a sex scandal